do not buy an investment property because you have violated the number one rule of money management, Ben, which is...
Stop!
Now, Ben, if you spend...
Yes.
Hey there, folks. Bryce Holdaway here, Ben Kingsley. We are the hosts of The Property Couch, and today we want to talk about the 5 things, Ben, you need to know before you buy an investment property.
What are they, Bryce? What are the 5 things?
Yeah, well, because quite often people just think, oh yeah, my friend's got an investment property, maybe I should buy one. Well, these are the things we think that you absolutely need to know
The basics.
before you do that. So
Fundamentals.
let's go blue, Ben.
All right, let's go blue. What do we got?
Number 1
Number 1.
is if you spend more, so if you spend more
I thought you were going for a dollar symbol there, but you didn't. You went for an arrow. I like it.
than you earn, this is my advice to you, Ben.
Yeah. Oh, what's that? Now you've got me intrigued, Bryce. Oh,
Stop.
where's that red one? I want to do a red one around there. Oh, there we go. Stop sign's red, isn't it? There we go. Boom.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Oh,
You've even
that.
gone-
Stop!
Now, Ben, if you spend,
Yes.
if your spending is greater than what you earn, stop. Because I'm going to say to you, do not buy an investment property because you have violated the number one rule of money management, Ben, which is make sure you spend
less than you earn.
Now-
didn't know where you go. Oh, I thought you.
I
I was just a
I was
prop
working
here.
with you. I was working with you. But folks, I know that sounds so incredibly straightforward, and
Yeah.
you might think, why have you put that as number 1? Because we see so many people who come in here, Ben, into our business, and they are sheepish, embarrassed, ashamed, got some guilt around the fact that their credit card has just incrementally crept up to a limit that they feel very uncomfortable not only disclosing, but working out how they're going to pay it off. And it's, number one thing is they've spent more than they earn.
Bryce, I don't mind people who have got a situation where they want forced savings because they spend too much discretionary. So a nice little mortgage on an investment property will stop some of that activity. So there is that sort of middle ground for those people. But fundamentally, we also see people who go out and say, yep, I can do this whole investment thing, and they go off and commit themselves and they can't afford it because they're committed too much spending compared to the income that they've got coming in as well. So it's really important that you understand fundamentals. Walk away, get organised with your money management first before you start to embark on the journey that could be life-changing.
Could be life-changing, but I can assure you folks that it works on a double-edged sword because it could be life-changing in the positive, Ben,
Yep.
or it could be life-changing on the negative because here's the tip, folks. If you're not a good money manager before you buy an investment property,
No deal! No deal!
I can assure you that being a property investment owner is only going to amplify and put a spotlight onto the fact that you're not a good money manager, Ben. So the 5 things that you need to know before you buy an investment property. Number 1 is if you spend more than you earn, don't do it. Get a handle on how you can actually do that.
Pretty basic, isn't it, Bryce? What's number 2?
Number 2, I'm glad you asked, Ben. Whilst
Oh, we're
doing
going for the blue. Yeah, what are we doing in blue?
Question is, where are you heading?
Okay. Best summarised, I reckon, as why are you doing this? What's your goals? What is your reason for doing this? I mean, you know, all of us have aspiration about trying to get better in a better financial position, but it needs to be more than that. There needs to be something in behind it in terms of why that is, isn't it, Bryce?
There is, and I got to say, folks, I've got a little confession to make here. When I bought my first investment property, the idea of buying an investment property was to create financial freedom, and that was it. But it was more around having a dream rather than a goal. And I always think that a dream with a date on it and some a plan on how to get there is what turns a dream into a goal. But I only had a dream. So what I would say to you is, are you clear on where you're headed and why you're doing it and what does it actually mean to you? Because the amount of money that this guy here needs to fund a comfortable lifestyle could be totally different to the amount of money that I need. He might need more, I might need less, or vice versa.
Correct.
But unless I know where I'm heading in the first place, revert back to rule number 1. Stop. Because you will be, it's kind of like if you think about a yacht, Ben, without a rudder, wherever the winds blow you is where you'll go, because if you don't know where you're headed, it'll be investment property today, it might be cryptocurrency tomorrow, it might be the next best thing that you're being exposed to. But when you are very rock solid clear on where you're going, you can then engineer from there what it takes to get there, and you can make sure that any prevailing winds, any crosswinds, anything that crosses your path, Ben, means that you still go forward on where you're headed.
And a tip for beginners. Same page. You both need to be on the same page. If you're going to do this as a couple, as a household, then you need to be on the same page. If you're not on the same page, coming back to your yacht analogy, there's going to be tacking and moving and less efficiency in getting to that destination that you need to. So I love the idea, and it's pretty cathartic, right? When you sit down with your loved one and you talk about, you know, a value alignment, goal alignment around what that story looks like, you actually get a little bit of momentum in that story as well.
You do, Ben. What's also interesting is whenever a rocket launches towards the moon or a satellite or whatever, Ben, the amount of time that rocket is on track is about 3% of the time. So the other 97% of the time is course correction, which you were talking about with the zigging and the zagging.
Yep.
So, but if that rocket didn't know where it's headed, Ben, anywhere will do. So
That's
folks, number 2, if you don't know where you're headed, that's a real problem.
Number 3, Bryce.
Number 3 is determine whether you are a farmer or a hunter. And you may ask, why do I need to know if I'm a farmer or a hunter? Well, farmers, let's think about what they do. They actually have multi-seasonal perspective, Ben. So they have to plant the crops today so that they can reap a harvest at some point in the future, which is generally not today. Sow, reap, sow, reap. That's what a farmer does. So they're playing the long game versus the hunter, Ben, who's out in the wild, and their instinct and their goal and their intention is very clear. I want a quick kill, and I want that to happen immediately. And the reason you need to work out if you're a farmer or a hunter is because the strategy that you would employ and the type of property that you buy, Ben, is totally different for a farmer than it is for a hunter.
Yeah, it is. I mean, ultimately, in the farming stage, you are planning. You know, you make a plan in terms of what that story looks like for you. You aren't rushing into it. It's not a survival thing you need to do to get the next meal. This is about preparing sustainable meals over the long period of time. So I love that analogy of the farmer versus the hunter. These people will survive short term. These people will thrive long term.
Exactly. So examples of this is someone who buys an investment property, Ben. They're playing the 10, 20, 30 year game. They're retiring out the debt. They have 10 hours a year invested into the portfolio versus a hunter who might be someone who's buying a house to flip for a quick spin, quick profit. They might be doing a quick development. Understanding which one of those are you is very, very critical before you buy an investment property.
Well, and I think if we close that out, what we're really talking about here is that cash flow. As it links into the goals and you being on the same page, that plan, that cash flow, because it's going to go up and it's going to come down if we're having kids and so forth. So over that journey, you've got to try and make sure that you've got the cash to sustain that as well. And the farmer understands that too when they don't overcommit, they don't over leverage. The hunter, again, is just basically looking for that short-term survival technique. So we always want to be a farmer.
All right, Ben, quickly, we're going to tick which one we are. You ready? 3, 2, 1.
Okay, there we go.
Oh,
that's
farmer.
me.
Beautiful.
Long-term, building assets over time, Bryce. I love that analogy.
Number 4 is work out if you are a pioneer.
Oh, we're going all over the shop here. Let me get me pioneer hat on.
Or a settler. Why is that important,
Settler.
Ben?
Oh, good question, mate. Pioneer versus settler.
Now, pioneers, Ben, they often have arrows in their back. They're usually the first people that are over the hill.
Yeah.
But because they're pioneering, they take some collateral damage that comes from that.
They do.
Versus a settler who usually comes in behind the pioneer. So why is that important for you to know before you buy an investment property? It's because this is really determining, are you someone who is a do-it-yourself?
Yep.
Or are you someone who is going to take some advice from someone who's been there and done that before you? And it's important to know because the large percentage, in our observation, having done this for over 20 years, Ben longer than 20 years, I'm 20,
Yeah,
I've been doing it for
older,
21 years.
A bit older than you, but
My observation is really simple. That
fact, me back's hurt. Sorry, Bryce.
well, mate, it's because you might have had an arrow in your back early days.
Maybe a couple.
The do-it-yourselfers. If we were to show a par graph.
A pie graph.
That's a pie and a bar graph.
Yes,
is a
boss.
par graph.
Yeah.
What we would observe is this. If I can borrow one of those colours,
I was hiding them from you, wasn't I?
this small percentage here would be settlers,
Yep.
and this percentage here would be pioneers. In terms of the do-it-yourself is larger, but our observation is the same, folks. That we see the results of the settlers to generally be better than the results of the pioneers because these people here, the pioneers, actually have to make mistakes using their own dime. They have to. It's the school of life. It's the university of life. They have these tuition fees around whether or not they make a mistake, versus the settlers who go, okay, you've got 3 arrows in your back. I want to know how to avoid having an arrow in my back, and they go, right, this is what you need to do to be able to do that. So
There's 2 L's that they get from being a settler versus a pioneer. Bryce, you ready for these 2 L's?
Yeah.
Basically, they learn and they leverage. So these people cut the pathways, set the road. These people travel down the roads that the pioneers cut. So it's really important to understand that the smarts that you get from learning from these pioneers and the mistakes they made are then captured into the settler, and they know not to make that same mistake again and to learn from that. So the more people that have the advantage of knowledge in this area are the people who you can learn from and leverage from as well.
So here you go, folks. Number 4, determine if you are a pioneer or a settler, because you need to determine which approach you are actually going to take and what the end value of those results are for you.
Number 5, Bryce.
Number 5 is very, very simple, Ben. Investment property is the only, let's see if I can write this out. It's the only investment market in the world, and I'll draw a little Australia there. Yep, investment property is the only investment market in the world not dominated
by
investors.
Correct.
So what does that mean? If I was in the share market, it's dominated by investors. If I'm in the commercial property market, it's dominated by investors. If I'm in the business market, it's dominated by investors. But if I'm in the residential property market, Ben, it is not dominated by investors. And the reason you need to know that as one of the 5 things you need to know before you buy an investment property is because a common mistake that we see is that people think because I live in a property, therefore I am qualified to know how to invest in property, Ben. And of course, that is just not true, is it?
Yes, in short, the technical thing is the valuation approach of what moves the value of property over time is not necessarily a technical calculation. Sure, it is in terms of the land and the improvements that are associated with that, but there is buyer behaviour that is potentially, one of these things that we always see is uncontrollable. So that's why we have peaks and troughs and booms and busts when it comes to the property market, because we don't act logically all the time in this particular space. But over time, the better properties perform and outperform the standard properties that are in this market. So we always say you don't want to think like an investor, you actually want to think like an owner-occupier.
So the rough rule of thumb, folks, which is slightly changing over time, but just for the principle we're talking about here, is 70% owner-occ and 30% are investors. Now, the reason that we need to know that it's not dominated by investors actually is where the opportunity is providing or presenting itself, because it's practical, emotional considerations that people are making to be in a property market, which we can actually understand as a science.
We do, yes.
And then if you understand that science and you understand the process, you can then give yourself an unfair advantage. Because if the majority of people are making decisions based on sometimes subconscious things, I want to be close to a school, I want to be close to my sister who lives down the road, I want to be next to that park, I want to be close to
amenity.
work. It's this practical reason. They haven't necessarily thought about it in terms of a growth. If you're one of the minority who understand what drives the majority and therefore avoid properties that are catering to the minority but buy properties that are catering to the majority, that's where the opportunity exists. And to be honest, Ben, that's why some people do really well when it comes to investing in property, and why other people just fall flat on their face. And then, not only do they fall flat on their face, they then have a hardened heart around this as a vehicle for them. They say, it just doesn't work. There's no way it works. And they might talk to a friend. I tried that once, but I'm not going there. It's because they didn't understand some of the basics.
How do I summarise this? I'll tell you how I summarise it. It's really simple, right? Smart property investors. Smart property investors are property takers, aren't they, Bryce?
Takers, I like it.
They're not property makers. They don't set the price. They take the price, because the price is set by the emotional owner-occupied buyer, and that's what pushes values higher over time. In the short term, it's very much a supply and demand game, but over the longer term, you are a smart investor, you'll be a price taker. You will always want to buy where the 70% want to live, not where the 30% want to invest, because if they don't get their investment returns, Bryce, what do? They sell up. They buzz off. That's what happens in mining towns. The riches are there early, but it's very, very volatile. Whereas these people over the long term are in those areas where you get that longer term outperformance.
Ben, very well said. So what we could say then is that the pioneers, if they don't take the advice from the settlers, they may find themselves prey to this particular market.
100%, Bryce. 100%.
Which is why this particular part is something that you need to be thinking about, folks. So 5 things that you need to know before you buy an investment property. Number 1, make sure you don't spend more than you earn. And if you do, stop. Don't even consider investing. Number 2, work out where you're heading so that you can get on the same page. Number 3, determine, are you a farmer with a multi-seasonal approach, or are you a hunter that needs to have the quick kill right now? Number 4, are you a pioneer, i.e. someone who's prepared to do it themselves and maybe cop a couple of arrows in the back? Or are you a settler? Are you going to let someone else tread the path before you and you just follow that? And number 5, you need to know that because investment property is the only investment market in the world not dominated by investors, you need to get some specialist understanding, learnings and teachings around what makes for an investment grade property versus something that's just merely investment stock, so that you can be part of the takers crowd, Ben, which is better than being part of the makers crowd.
So they're the basics, right? If you get these, you're now moving the dial in terms of your knowledge base, but there is more, Bryce, isn't there? There's a lot more under the covers, under the bonnet, in terms of getting into this fundamental. So we have a webinar coming up, don't we?
We do have a webinar coming up, and we're going to go through it. We're also going to do, there's a little thing that we're going to uncover, Ben, and show within that webinar what happens if you were to buy a $400,000 investment property. And what happens if you actually were to consider everything that allowed you, without too much more effort, to buy a $500,000 property? And what would be the ongoing impact of that for you in terms of determining where you're heading? So we're going to cover all of that and more. And it's going to be this coming Wednesday, the 24th of July at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And it's how to build a property portfolio in a recovering market and retire on $2,000 per week without having to renovate, redevelop, or sacrifice your weekends. We're going to go through some very specific teaching. We're going to show you how to buy an investment property without impacting the family budget. We're going to show you how to actually find the right investment property, Ben, and we are going to go live and show you how to get $2,000 per week. $2,000 per week. We're going to actually show you how to build a portfolio. Ben, ready for this?
Yep.
With 5 properties or less. So we're not going to do 10 plus. We're not going to renovate. We're not going to redevelop. We're going to show you how to be a farmer. We're going to show you how to know where you're heading. We're going to show you how to make sure that you spend less than you earn. And if you spend more than you earn, we're actually going to show you how to fix that. We're going to show you how to leverage from someone who's been a settler. And we're also going to teach you, Ben, on how to make sure that you cater to be a taker, not a maker.
It's all about knowledge building, so we'd love to see you along next Wednesday night. It's fundamental. We've got the broad spectrum here in this bit of education, but we really do get into the numbers, which is what I love. So I'm very happy for Bryce to do most of the writing. When it comes to the numbers, I like to do the number crunching. So we're going to do a lot of number crunching and we're going to teach you about those. So we're moving the dial in terms of your understanding around how you invest smartly in residential property.
You heard it first, folks. He is the Property Investment Advisor of the Year twice, plus runner-up, and also the Property Investment Advisory Firm of the Year as well. So there is some pedigree. So folks, if you'd love to join us in that webinar, why don't you click on the link, and we would love to see you there on the night.